The Zephyrian hunting grounds stretched across 3 star systems, a testament to the species' dominance over the galaxy's eastern spiral arm. For 12,000 years, no creature had challenged the Zephyrians' claim as the apex predators of known space. Their obsidian scales could deflect plasma rounds. Their razor-sharp claws could slice through starship hull plating, and their neural capacity exceeded that of most sentient species by a factor of 10. Commander Vexthera stood 8 feet tall on her digitigrade legs, her serpentine neck swaying as she observed the latest batch of prisoners through the energy barrier. The detention center on Kepler 442b housed specimens from 47 different species, all destined for the great hunt that would commence at dawn. "Another pathetic collection," growled her lieutenant, Karneth, his forked tongue tasting the fear pheromones in the recycled air. The Altarian ambassadors barely lasted 10 minutes in the last hunt. These soft diplomats provide no sport. Vexthera's predatory eyes, each the size of a human fist, focused on a particular cell. Inside sat a creature unlike any in their collection. Bipedal, lacking natural weapons, with pale skin that looked impossibly fragile. The being appeared to be sleeping, its breathing steady and calm despite its circumstances. "What species is that one?" she asked, her voice a rumbling bass that vibrated through the floor plating. Karneth consulted his data pad with clawed fingers. "According to the manifest from the captured vessel, it calls itself human, from a small planet in the outer rim called Earth. Third-generation space travelers, recently achieved faster-than-light capabilities. The bounty hunters classified it as harmless and sold it to us for entertainment value only." Harmless. Vexthera's head tilted, a gesture that had preceded the death of countless beings. "We shall see. Has it been fed? Standard prisoner rations. Consume them without complaint. No allergic reactions, no protests. It simply ate and returned to that position." The human hadn't moved in 6 hours, sitting cross-legged with its back straight and eyes closed. Unlike the other prisoners who paced, wept, or raged against their confinement, this creature exhibited a stillness that Vexthera found oddly unsettling. "Perhaps it's catatonic from fear," Karneth suggested. "Some species shut down when faced with predators beyond their comprehension." But Vexthera's enhanced senses detected no fear scent from the human cell. No elevated heart rate, no stress hormones. If anything, the creature seemed to be in a state of deep relaxation. "Commander," interrupted a technician from the control station, "we're receiving an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting information about recent captures." Vexthera snarled. The Council's interference in Zephyrian traditions had grown more frequent in recent decades. Their weakness disgusted her. Attempting to regulate the natural order through bureaucracy and ethical guidelines. "Tell them we have nothing to report," she commanded, "and remind them that our hunting grounds are sovereign territory." As the technician scurried to comply, Vexthera found her gaze drawn back to the human. Something about its complete lack of fear intrigued her predatory instincts in ways she couldn't explain. Every fiber of evolution had programmed her species to hunt, to dominate, to prove their superiority through violence. Yet this small, soft creature sat in their most feared prison as if it were meditating in a garden. "What are you?" she whispered, pressing one massive claw against the transparent aluminum barrier. Dr. Marcus Chun had been awake for the past 6 hours, though he'd maintained the meditative posture that seemed to confuse his captors. As a xenoanthropologist, he'd studied dozens of predatory species, and the Zephyrians followed predictable patterns. They expected fear, fed on terror, and used psychological intimidation as part of their hunting ritual. By refusing to participate in their game, he was already changing the dynamic. Through his closed eyelids, Marcus could sense the massive form of what appeared to be the alpha predator studying him. He'd learned to read body language across species barriers, and the creature's posture suggested confusion rather than hunger. Good. Confusion created opportunities. The cell's basic life support told him this facility was designed for long-term containment, not immediate execution. The presence of other species, he could hear at least 20 different physiological markers through the walls, suggested this was some kind of collection center. Given the Zephyrians' reputation, Marcus suspected he was destined for something called a hunt. His research had included classified military briefings about Zephyrian culture. They were apex predators who had evolved past the need for hunting for survival, but retained the psychological drive. They captured sentient beings from across the galaxy for elaborate recreational hunts, treating it as both sport and religious ritual. The ethical implications made Marcus's stomach turn, but as an academic, he found their social structure fascinating. Pure meritocracy based on hunting prowess, with leadership positions determined by successful kills. No art, no philosophy, no science beyond what served their predatory nature. They had dominated this region of space for millennia, but Marcus suspected their success had made them rigid, over-specialized. They expected certain responses to stimuli, and when those responses didn't manifest, their evolved instincts struggled to adapt. Fascinating, he murmured, opening his eyes for the first time since his capture. The massive predator that had been observing him took a step back, clearly startled by the sound. Marcus turned his head slowly, making eye contact with the creature through the barrier. "You're wondering why I'm not afraid," he said calmly in Galactic Standard. "It's a reasonable question." The Zephyrian's head tilted, a gesture Marcus recognized from his studies as predatory curiosity. She was evaluating him as prey, but the evaluation wasn't proceeding as expected. "You understand our language?" the creature rumbled, her voice like distant thunder. "I understand 47 languages," Marcus replied. "Understanding is what humans do. It's our evolutionary advantage. Humans have no evolutionary advantages. You possess no natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no superior physical capabilities." Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. At 6 feet tall, he was dwarfed by the Zephyrian, but he maintained steady eye contact. "We don't need claws when we can convince others to hunt for us. We don't need enhanced senses when we can build instruments that see across the electromagnetic spectrum. We don't need superior physical capabilities when we can construct machines that amplify our strength by orders of magnitude." The predator's pupils dilated, a sign of increased interest in Zephyrian psychology. "You speak of tools," she said. "Tools are crutches for the weak. Tools are force multipliers for the intelligent. Tell me, Commander, and I'm assuming you're the commander based on your bearing and the deference shown by your subordinate, when was the last time your species evolved? When did you last face a challenge that required adaptation rather than the application of existing capabilities?" For the first time in her adult life, Vexthera found herself genuinely uncertain how to respond to prey. Dawn on Kepler 442b painted the hunting preserve in shades of amber and gold. The artificial ecosystem sprawled across 2,000 square kilometers, featuring terrain from dozens of worlds to provide variety for the hunt. Dense jungles gave way to crystal caverns, which opened onto vast grasslands broken by rocky outcroppings and swift rivers. Vexthera addressed the hunting party from a floating platform above the starting arena. 12 Zephyrian nobles had paid handsomely for the privilege of participating in this hunt. Their scales polished to mirror brightness, their ceremonial weapon harnesses gleaming in the morning light. "Today we hunt 47 specimens," she announced, her voice carrying across the preserve through amplification systems. "As tradition demands, they will be released with basic survival equipment and a 6-hour head start. The hunt concludes at sunset. Glory to the successful, shame to the weak." The prisoners were processed through the release mechanism in species groups, each provided with a basic survival pack containing water purification tablets, emergency rations, and a crude blade. Most fled immediately into the preserve, their terror driving them to seek hiding places that would only delay the inevitable. Marcus was the final prisoner to be processed. As the guards removed his restraints, Vexthera approached him personally. "You will be given the same head start as the others," she said. "But I want you to understand, this preserve has been designed over centuries to eliminate any possibility of escape. There are no weak points, no overlooked details. Every hiding place has been found and catalogued. Every defensive position can be breached. You will run, you will hide, and eventually you will be caught." Marcus shouldered his survival pack and checked its contents with professional efficiency. "Commander, may I ask you a question before I begin?" The request was so unexpected that Vexthera found herself nodding before she realized it. "In all your centuries of conducting these hunts, has any prey ever approached the experience differently than you expected?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, have you ever encountered prey that didn't run?" Vexthera's laugh was a sound like grinding granite. "Prey that doesn't run is prey that dies quickly. The instinct to flee is universal among thinking beings. It's the foundation of the hunt." "Interesting," Marcus said. "Then today should be educational for both of us." Before Vexthera could process the implications of that statement, Marcus walked calmly into the preserve. Not running, not looking back, moving with the measured pace of someone taking a nature walk. The hunting party watched in confused silence as their prey simply walked away. "Should we?" began one of the noble hunters. "No," Vexthera said sharply. "The human gets its full head start, but I want sensor drones tracking its movement. I need to understand what it's doing." For the next 6 hours, the monitoring station tracked Marcus as he moved through the preserve with apparent randomness. He spent 20 minutes sitting by a stream, not hiding but simply observing the water flow. He collected samples of local plant life, examining them with scientific curiosity. He constructed a small shelter not in a concealed location, but in a clearing where it would be easily visible from above. "Commander," reported the sensor technician, "the human appears to be studying the preserve. It's taken detailed measurements of water flow rates, soil composition, and wind patterns. And it's documenting everything in some kind of notation system." Vexthera studied the display with growing unease. "What about the other prey? Behaving as expected, hiding in caves, climbing trees, seeking concealment in dense vegetation. Standard fear responses." As the 6-hour mark approached, Vexthera found herself more interested in the human's activities than in preparing for the hunt itself. The creature had exhibited no fear, no desperation, no apparent concern for its impending death. Instead, it had treated the preserve like a research laboratory. When the hunting horns sounded, the noble hunters launched themselves into the preserve with predatory enthusiasm. Within 2 hours, they had located and killed 38 of the prisoners. The Altarian ambassadors lasted 14 minutes. The Centaurian merchants managed almost an hour by working together before being systematically eliminated. But when the hunters converged on the humans' last known location, they found only an empty shelter and a message carved into the bark of a nearby tree in Galactic standard. "Thank you for the head start. The real hunt begins now. MC. Where is it?" demanded Lord Kethmore, the most experienced hunter in the group. Vexthera studied her sensors with growing alarm. "I don't know. We lost the signal 20 minutes ago. It was in this exact location, and then nothing. Impossible. The tracking system is infallible." "So we believed," Vexthera muttered, realizing that for the first time in her species' recorded history, they had lost track of their prey. Marcus had spent his 6-hour head start conducting the most important research of his career. While his fellow prisoners had focused on hiding, he had studied his captor's hunting methodology, mapped the preserve's sensor network, and identified the crucial weakness in the Zephyrians' seemingly perfect system. They had never encountered prey that thought systematically. The tracking system relied on motion sensors, heat signatures, and biochemical markers. It was designed to locate beings trying to hide, not someone who understood how the technology functioned. Marcus's background in xenoarchaeology had required him to master dozens of scanning technologies, and the Zephyrian sensors were sophisticated but not revolutionary. He had defeated the system not through superior technology, but through understanding its assumptions. The mud from the stream bank contained high levels of iron oxide and rare earth elements that interfered with certain scanning frequencies. Smeared across his skin and clothing, it created enough sensor distortion to break the tracking lock. The plant samples he'd collected included several species that produced strong scented oils, masking his biochemical signature when properly applied. But most importantly, he had used the 6 hours to observe the hunters themselves. Zephyrians were ambush predators by nature, despite their current recreational hunting practices. Their enhanced senses were adapted for detecting prey in specific patterns: the panicked breathing of fleeing victims, the rapid heartbeat of terror, the chemical signatures of fear and desperation. When those patterns weren't present, their sensory processing struggled to categorize what they were detecting. Marcus moved through the preserve like a researcher, not prey. His breathing remained controlled, his heart rate steady, his biochemistry that of someone engaged in fascinating academic work rather than a life-or-death struggle. To the Zephyrian hunting party, he had effectively become invisible. From his concealed position in the crystal caverns, hidden not by cowering in shadows but by understanding how light refraction would distort their visual sensors, Marcus observed the hunters' growing frustration. "Spread out," commanded Vexthera through their communication system. "Check every cave, every tree, every possible hiding spot. One small human cannot simply disappear." But Marcus wasn't hiding in the traditional sense. He was using the preserve's own design against its creators. The hunting ground had been engineered to provide variety and challenge, which meant it contained numerous microenvironments with different atmospheric conditions, mineral compositions, and electromagnetic properties. Each transition between environments created sensor gaps that could be exploited by someone who understood the underlying science. As the hunting party split up to cover more ground, Marcus began the second phase of his plan. He followed Lord Kethmore, the party's most experienced hunter, maintaining a distance of exactly 40 meters, close enough to observe, far enough to remain undetected by keeping environmental features between himself and the predator's sensors. Kethmore moved through the jungle section of the preserve with fluid grace, his enhanced senses scanning for any trace of remaining prey. His confidence was absolute. In 3 centuries of hunting, he had never failed to claim his target. Marcus waited until Kethmore paused near a stream to examine possible tracks, then stepped into a clearing 15 meters away. "Lord Kethmore," he called softly. The Zephyrian spun toward the sound, his pupils dilating as he focused on the small human standing calmly in the open. "Impossible," Kethmore growled. "Our sensors showed no life signs in this area." "Your sensors are designed to track prey," Marcus replied. "I'm not prey. I'm a researcher studying predator behavior. You've been my primary subject for the past hour." "You've been studying me? Your hunting patterns are fascinating. Highly efficient, but based on evolutionary assumptions that may no longer be relevant. For instance, you assume that all potential prey will attempt to flee rather than observe. You expect fear responses rather than curiosity. You've optimized your entire methodology around targets that react predictably to threat stimuli." Kethmore's claws extended reflexively. "You dare analyze me like some primitive beast? On the contrary, you're an apex predator perfectly adapted to your evolutionary niche. But adaptation can become a limitation when environmental conditions change. And they have changed, Lord Kethmore. The galaxy now contains species that don't fit your ancestral hunting parameters." "Enough philosophy," Kethmore snarled, launching himself toward Marcus with blinding speed. Marcus sidestepped at the last possible moment, his movement precise and economical. Kethmore's claws raked through empty air as his momentum carried him past his target. "Predictable," Marcus observed as the Zephyrian landed and spun for another attack. "You rely on overwhelming force and intimidation. When those fail, you have no secondary strategies." The second attack came faster, but Marcus had already identified the pattern. Zephyrians attacked in straight lines, using their superior speed and strength to overwhelm opposition. They had no experience with opponents who studied their methodology and adapted accordingly. This time, Marcus didn't simply dodge. As Kethmore's claws swept toward him, he dropped to the ground and swept the predator's legs with a technique learned from studying 47 different martial arts traditions across the galaxy. Kethmore crashed to the forest floor with a sound like falling timber. Before he could recover, Marcus had retrieved a fallen branch and positioned himself strategically. "The hunt is over, Lord Kethmore," Marcus said quietly. "Yield." For the first time in his centuries of existence, the galaxy's most feared predator found himself looking up at prey that had become something else entirely. Commander Vexthera arrived at the scene to find Lord Kethmore sitting against a tree with the humans standing nearby, both apparently engaged in conversation. Her enhanced hearing picked up fragments of discussion about evolutionary biology and adaptation strategies. "Kethmore," she called, her voice sharp with confusion and growing alarm. "Report your status." The ancient hunter looked up at his commander with an expression she had never seen on a Zephyrian face. Genuine bewilderment mixed with something that might have been respect. "The hunt is concluded, Commander," Kethmore said slowly. "I have been defeated." "Impossible." Vexthera's massive form blocked out the filtered sunlight as she approached. "You are the most successful hunter in our recorded history. This human possesses no weapons, no natural defenses, no superior physical capabilities." "No," Marcus agreed, making no move to flee despite facing two apex predators. "But I possess something your species hasn't encountered in millennia. Unpredictability born of diverse experience." Vexthera's predatory instincts screamed at her to attack, to restore the natural order through violence. But something about the human's complete lack of fear gave her pause. Every evolutionary imperative had programmed her to respond to specific prey behaviors, and this creature was exhibiting none of them. "Explain yourself," she commanded. Marcus gestured to a fallen log. "May I sit?" This conversation could take a while. The request was so unexpected that Vexthera found herself nodding. Marcus settled comfortably on the log as if he were in a university lecture hall rather than face-to-face with the galaxy's most feared predators. "Your species achieved apex predator status through natural selection," he began. "You became perfect hunters by eliminating any competition that could challenge you. Over time, this success eliminated the evolutionary pressure that drove your development. You stopped adapting because you no longer needed to adapt." "We are the pinnacle of evolution," Vexthera growled. "You are the pinnacle of a specific evolutionary path," Marcus corrected gently. "But evolution doesn't stop. It simply takes new directions when environmental conditions change. The galaxy today contains thousands of species that never competed with you directly. We developed along entirely different evolutionary trajectories." "Humans are weak," Kethmore interjected, though his tone lacked its usual conviction. "You have no natural weapons. We have the most powerful weapon that ever evolved, the ability to learn from other species and incorporate their strengths into our own behavior. I defeated Lord Kethmore not through superior physical capabilities, but by combining defensive techniques from the Regelian monks, movement patterns from the Tau Ceti dancer warriors, and strategic thinking from the vegan military academies." Vexthera's head tilted as she processed this information. "You borrowed abilities from other species?" "More than that. Human culture is built on the concept of cumulative learning. Every generation adds to the knowledge base of those who came before. We don't just adapt to environmental challenges, we adapt to them by studying how other species have solved similar problems. We're evolutionary scavengers, if you will." "That is." Vexthera paused, searching for the concept. "That is adaptation without biological change." "Exactly. While your species perfected one highly effective approach to survival, humanity developed the ability to master dozens of approaches simultaneously. We're persistence hunters like the Centaurians when the situation calls for it, ambush predators like you when that's more effective, pack hunters like the Denebians when cooperation is required." Kethmore shifted uncomfortably. "But surely physical limitations must constrain these borrowed abilities?" Marcus stood and moved to a nearby tree, demonstrating as he spoke. "Physical limitations can be overcome through technology, technique, and understanding. I can't match your claw strength, but I can use leverage to redirect your force against you. I can't match your speed, but I can predict your movement patterns and position myself advantageously. I can't match your senses, but I can understand your sensory processing well enough to exploit its assumptions." As if to demonstrate, Marcus seemed to fade from their enhanced vision, using the same light refraction techniques that had hidden him from the sensors. "Your stealth technology is primitive," Vexthera said, though she found herself scanning harder to maintain visual contact. "I'm not using technology," Marcus replied. his voice seeming to come from multiple directions simultaneously as he moved between visual distortion fields created by the crystal formations. I'm using understanding of how your visual processing works. Your eyes are optimized for tracking rapid movement and detecting specific threat signatures. When neither is present, your brain literally stops registering what you're seeing. Marcus stepped back into clear view, and both Zephyrians realized they had completely lost track of him for several seconds despite him being in plain sight. "This is sorcery," Kethmore muttered. "This is science applied to behavioral psychology," Marcus corrected. "And it's precisely why your hunting methodology failed today. You were hunting a human using techniques designed for traditional prey. But humans aren't traditional anything. We're evolutionary wildcards." Vexthera found herself experiencing an emotion she couldn't immediately identify. It took several moments to recognize it as intellectual curiosity, a response her species had largely bred out of their nature. "What do you want, human?" she asked finally. Marcus smiled, and both predators were surprised to realize the expression conveyed warmth rather than threat display. "I want to teach you," he said simply, "and I want to learn from you. This hunt has shown me predatory techniques I've never encountered before. Your species has mastered aspects of hunting that could revolutionize human understanding of efficiency and precision." "You wish to learn our techniques?" Vexthera asked, confused. "I wish to engage in cultural exchange. You have abilities that could benefit humanity. We have approaches that could benefit you. The galaxy is large enough for both predators and innovators, possibly even for predatory innovators." For the first time in her adult life, Commander Vexthera found herself considering possibilities that had never occurred to her species. 6 months later, the Kepler 442b facility had been transformed from a hunting preserve into something unprecedented in galactic history, a cross-species research and training institute. The former detention center now housed representatives from dozens of worlds, all engaged in the radical experiment of collaborative learning that Marcus had proposed. Commander Vexthera stood in what had once been the hunting command center, watching displays that showed not tracking data for prey, but progress reports on joint research projects. Zephyrian hunters worked alongside human strategists to develop new approaches to planetary exploration. Human scientists collaborated with Zephyrian sensory specialists to create detection technologies that far surpassed either species' individual capabilities. "The Council representatives are requesting another demonstration," reported Karneth, who had adapted to his new role as liaison officer with surprising enthusiasm. "Which techniques are they interested in seeing?" Vexthera asked. "The stealth applications Dr. Chun developed using our sensory analysis, and the new tracking methodologies that combine human pattern recognition with our enhanced perception." Vexthera nodded approvingly. The Galactic Council had initially been skeptical of the proposal to transform the hunting preserve into a research facility. The concept of Zephyrians and humans working together had seemed impossible to most species. But the results spoke for themselves. Human adaptability combined with Zephyrian precision had produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. More importantly, it had proven that apex predators could evolve beyond their original niche without losing their essential nature. "Commander," interrupted Dr. Marcus Chen as he entered the command center, "we've received the data from the Rigel System expedition. The hybrid exploration team successfully mapped 3 previously unknown worlds using our combined methodologies. 0 casualties, complete data collection, and they finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The human insistence on safety protocols continues to mystify my people," Vexthera admitted. "But the results are undeniable." Marcus smiled. "We've learned that the goal isn't to eliminate risk. It's to understand and manage it. Your species taught us that predatory instincts can be channeled into scientific exploration. We taught you that cooperation multiplies individual capabilities. The other hunting clans are still resistant to these changes," Karneth observed. "Lord Veltar's faction continues to insist that traditional hunting is the only true expression of our nature. Change is always difficult," Marcus acknowledged, "but evolution never stops. Species that refuse to adapt when environmental conditions change tend to become extinct. The galaxy is becoming more interconnected every year. Isolation is no longer a viable survival strategy for any species. Vexthera turned from the displays to study the human who had fundamentally altered her worldview. 6 months ago, she would have killed him without hesitation. Now, she considered him one of the most valuable assets her people had ever acquired. Dr. Chun, she said formally, I have been asked to extend an invitation from the High Council of Hunters. They wish to offer you honorary membership in the Apex Predator Guild. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm honored, but I'm not sure I qualify. I've never actually killed anyone in combat. The definition of Apex Predator has evolved. Vexthera replied with what Marcus had learned to recognize as Zephyrian humor. We now understand that the most dangerous predators are those who consume ideas, digest them, and use them to reshape entire ecosystems. By that definition, you may be the most apex predator any of us have encountered. In that case, Marcus said, I accept, but I have one condition. Name it. The guild must be open to representatives from all species. If we're truly going to evolve beyond our original limitations, we need to learn from everyone, not just traditional predators. Vexthera considered this proposal. 6 months ago, it would have been unthinkable. The idea of diluting the purity of predatory excellence with input from prey species would have been heretical. But 6 months ago, she had thought evolution was a completed process rather than an ongoing challenge. Agreed, she said finally, though I suspect Lord Veltar's faction will find this development even more disturbing than our current collaboration. Change is always disturbing to those who've stopped evolving, Marcus replied. But the alternative to change is extinction, and I don't think either of our species is ready for that. As if summoned by their conversation, an alarm chimed softly, indicating an incoming transmission from the outer rim. Karneth activated the communication system, and the command center filled with the image of a human starship captain. Research Station Kepler 442b, this is Captain Rodriguez of the exploration vessel Curiosity. We've encountered an unknown species in the Tau Ceti system that appears to be actively hostile to all contact attempts. Our standard diplomatic protocols have failed, and we're requesting assistance from your joint research team. Vexthera and Marcus exchanged glances, both recognizing the opportunity. Captain Rodriguez, Vexthera responded. We're assembling a contact team immediately. Dr. Chun will lead the human research contingent, and I will lead the Zephyrian specialists. Between human adaptability and Zephyrian predatory analysis, we should be able to develop an effective approach. Acknowledged, Station Kepler 442b. Will maintain safe distance until your arrival. As the transmission ended, Marcus turned to Vexthera with the expression she had learned to recognize as anticipation of an interesting challenge. Ready for a new kind of hunt, Commander? Vexthera's laugh was no longer the sound of grinding granite, but something warmer. The sound of a predator who had discovered that the greatest prey was ignorance itself. The greatest hunts, she replied, are those where everyone returns home with new understanding. Let's go teach the galaxy what apex predators can accomplish when they hunt together. As their joint task force prepared for departure, both species understood that they had evolved beyond their original nature without losing what made them strong. The hunt continued, but now they hunted knowledge, understanding, and the infinite possibilities that arose when different forms of intelligence learned to work together. The galaxy's strongest predator had not bowed to a human out of weakness, but out of recognition that true strength came from the wisdom to evolve beyond the limitations of the past. And in the vast expanse of space, new forms of cooperation were being born from the marriage of predatory precision and human adaptability, a combination that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly apex.